Do you feel like you are living a life you did not choose? You wake up tired even without having done anything. You look at the clock more than you look at yourself. You smile at others, but forgot how to smile with truth. And here's the question that no one has the courage to ask. What if modern work was not made to fulfill you, but to slowly destroy you without you noticing? This is not a video about productivity. It is a video about truth. About the price of pretending for too long. About the brutal healing that begins when you stop adapting and start listening to yourself. And if you are here, it is because something inside you still refuses the idea that this soulless routine is all there is. So stay until the end. Because if you ignore this whisper, it will become a scream. If topics like psychology, philosophy, and the darkness of the human soul interest you, subscribe to the channel now. What we call pleasure, deep down, is a golden cell. Modern man lives convinced he is free because he can satisfy his desires whenever he wants. But what he does not realize is that precisely because he is constantly satisfying himself, he becomes incapable of mastering himself. Immediate pleasure, whether through sex, pornography, social media, or female validation, acts as a sedative for the soul. It intoxicates the male spirit, weakens his will, and disconnects him from his inner mission. The mind, dulled by the addiction to pleasure, loses the ability to concentrate, to sacrifice, to create. Carl Jung said that everything not brought to consciousness returns as destiny. And unconscious pleasure turns exactly into that, destiny. The man who never questions his impulses becomes their slave. He lives eternally chasing sensations, women, stimuli, but never finds peace. Because his nervous system is conditioned to easy dopamine, external recognition, orgasm without love. And when all this fails, as it inevitably fails, he feels empty, weak, anxious, desperate. He was programmed to desire, but never to conquer himself. This is the silent tragedy of modern man. He believes he is in control when in fact he is manipulated by internal forces he never understood. We live in a society that transforms sex into merchandise and male sexuality into distraction. The constant visual appeal, free pornography, the objectification of intimacy, all this bombards the male unconscious and imprisons his vital energy in the repetition of compulsive patterns. This man cannot focus, cannot create, cannot lead, because his mind is colonized, and his body, exhausted by years of energetic waste, becomes a shell. The prison of pleasure is not made of bars but habits. It disguises itself as freedom, modernity, self-knowledge. But what it really produces is a fragmented man. A man who runs from pain, avoids silence, fears solitude, and therefore never dives into himself. He fears the emptiness he feels when away from pleasure. But what he does not realize is that this emptiness is the doorway to his transformation. The problem is that he fills this gap with distractions instead of courage. The mind imprisoned by pleasure is a weak, impulsive, manageable mind. This is exactly what the great systems of power want. Sleeping men, predictable men, men who give up their inner strength in exchange for an instant of satisfaction. But at the moment, a man decides to contain this impulse. At the second, he transforms this hunger into focus. He begins to become dangerous. You are not failing. You are being emptied. And the cruelest part, on purpose. The constant feeling of tiredness, mental confusion, loss of enthusiasm for small things. All this is not accidental. It is part of a silent, cold, and efficient architecture. The modern work system was designed not to fulfill you, but to empty you quietly. It does not want you to break. It wants you to function broken, because a broken human being is more obedient, more moldable, more useful. And it is this usefulness that matters to the corporate world, Not your integrity, not your soul, not your truth. Over time, we were taught that feeling tired is weakness, that complaining is ingratitude, that doubting the path is irresponsibility. So you swallow the discomfort, keep silent, adapt. But every adaptation has a price, and the price here is high. It is the gradual loss of your identity. Carl Jung warned us that living a life under a false identity fragments us, and this is exactly what is happening. You divide yourself into 1,000 parts to fit demands, goals, roles. Every meeting you enter smiling outside and imploding inside, it is another piece of yourself lost. The modern work environment is a performance and appearance factory. There, you are evaluated by metrics, not by meaning, but productivity, not by purpose. It does not matter if you are emotionally exhausted, spiritually empty, psychologically confused. What matters is that you meet the goal, reply to the email, join the call. The rest the system calls personal problems. But what they call problems is in fact the soul manifesting. A soul that's suffocated by years of meaningless tasks finally begins to scream, but this scream is inaudible. It comes disguised. Insomnia, apathy, silent crises at 2 in the morning. This process has a name in analytical psychology: ego fragmentation. It is when what you feel no longer finds space to exist, and the only thing left is performance. You act, but do not feel. You speak, but do not listen to yourself. You deliver, but do not find yourself. Outside, everything works. Inside, everything is collapsing. The worst kind of collapse is the one no one sees, because it happens cleanly, politely, silently. The world applauds your resilience while your essence starves every day. And in the end, all that remains is a version of you ... Polished, productive, functional, but completely empty. You were taught not to ask questions, but now one needs to be asked. How many parts of you have you sacrificed to become someone functional? The answer may hurt, but this pain is necessary, because it is only when the emptiness becomes unbearable that you start to look for something real. Jung said healing only begins when we dare to face the shadow. And the first step is to recognize you are not sick. You are waking up. The system seems normal only because everyone around you is also emptied, but you still feel. And that means not all is lost. In the invisible theater of the professional world, everyone wears masks. You too. You adjust your tone of voice, choose calculated words, fake enthusiasm. You learn to appear stable even when you are falling apart inside. And this, in Jungian psychology, is called persona, the version of you shaped to please, to be accepted, to survive socially. The persona is not a problem by itself. It is necessary. But when you spend too much time with it, something begins to be lost. You forget who you were before pretending so much. And little by little, the role devours the actor. In the modern work environment, the persona became the norm. You are no longer paid for what you feel or think, but for what you manage to appear. Emotional intelligence became synonymous with self-censorship. Professionalism became synonymous with neutrality. Being human became synonymous with being predictable. And then you learn, it is not worth being authentic. It is not worth being vulnerable. The system rewards those who adapt, not those who reveal themselves. And what was once only a mask for meetings becomes a second skin you can no longer take off. Over time, constant use of the persona creates an abyss between who you are and who you show to be. Carl Jung called this soul dissociation. It is as if there were two yous, one that survives out there, another that screams inside. But the world only sees the first, and you begin to believe the second might not exist anymore. But it still exists. It is just buried under layers and layers of self-control, adaptation, and silence. This is the invisible price of a system that demands performance above all. It kidnaps your spontaneity and trades it for a socially acceptable performance. The problem is that no one sustains this forever. You start missing yourself, missing what made you laugh truly, the moments when you felt whole, the conversations where you did not have to think before speaking. But this original version of you was silenced, edited, compressed. And the more you forget it, the emptier you feel. Life becomes a sequence of functional days where you deliver everything except your truth. Until one day you realize you no longer know what you really like, what you really feel, what you really want. Because you spent too much time being what was expected and too little time being who you are. The mask became a prison, and no one noticed. But now maybe you are starting to notice the cracks, that desire to disappear, that nameless anguish, that exhaustion that does not pass even after rest. All this is not weakness. It is the self trying to come back. It is your essence knocking on the persona's wall, asking for space. Jung said the human being gets sick when ignoring his own soul. And maybe, just maybe, the pain you feel today is a final warning. You are too alive to keep pretending. The alienation you feel is not by chance. It is inheritance. The work system that dominates the world today has deep and dark roots. At the beginning of the 20th century, a man named Frederick Winslow Taylor decided that the ideal worker was neither creative nor questioning. He was efficient. Taylor was the father of scientific management, a model that saw the human being as a gear to be optimized. For him, the perfect employee was a machine with legs, someone who could be timed, measured, replaced. This logic contaminated the world. It left factories, entered offices, infiltrated schools. And today, even if you do not work with your hands, you still live under the command of the same industrial mentality. Be useful, or be discarded. Alienation begins when you stop being a who and become a how much. How much you produce, how much you earn, how long you can endure. The system does not want your individuality. It is too inconvenient. It dreams, it creates, it questions. And all that is dangerous for a model based on repetition, control, and predictability. That is why your essence is slowly suffocated while your adapted persona is rewarded with salaries, badges, and pretty words like efficiency and resilience. But inside you, there is a corpse, a piece of your soul that stopped growing the moment you began living to please spreadsheets. Jung called this alienation of the soul, the point where what you do and who you are become separate entities. You go to work, deliver what is asked, smile, attend meetings, but feel your life is happening somewhere else, as if you were watching everything from outside, like a spectator of your own existence. That feeling of displacement, that something is wrong, even when everything seems right, is the clearest symptom that your soul is exiled. And the routine, with its apparent normality, was designed precisely so that you never have time to realize this. You were trained to confuse functionality with happiness. But hitting goals does not mean being alive. Getting promoted does not mean being whole. And arriving home exhausted every day is not a medal. It is a warning. The system applauds you for being always available, always productive, always adapted. But who applauds when you say no? Who recognizes when you choose to preserve yourself instead of annihilating yourself? The answer is brutal. No one. Because the world was not programmed for that. But that is precisely why this choice must come from you. You are not lazy. You are not ungrateful. You are not weak. You are just reacting as any human being would react to a dehumanizing system. The fatigue that does not pass, the silent anxiety, the constant apathy, are ways your body and soul say, "This is not life." And perhaps your greatest act of lucidity is not to try harder, but to stop. Stop betraying yourself. Stop performing. Stop living for a system that does not recognize who you are. Because alienation continues only as long as you allow it to continue. Now, listen carefully. If this video spoke to you, it is because you are already awakening to who you really are. Subscribe to the channel. Some think this was the end. But be careful. The war is not over yet. There are still things left unsaid. These 2 videos in front of you are not here by chance. And what if everything you believe about yourself is just a reflection of someone else's gaze? Click now on one of the videos beside and start breaking this mirror. You will have to risk the click. So, which one will you choose?